Hello and welcome to another episode of Nathan Builds Robots. Today we're going to be taking a look at this Make 3D printer. Well, it's not exactly a 3D printer, it's more of a 2.5D printer, but we'll get into that later. Make is a subsidiary company of Anker. So Anker, you might know them from their power banks and wall adapters. They're really great products, but we're not talking about power banks today. We're talking about the 3D printer that they're bringing to market here. So what this is it's a UV resin-based inkjet printer. It's actually a lot like your regular 2D printer, but instead of printing on paper, you can print on just about anything. But first I need to make a disclosure. Eufy did send me this printer for testing and review, and they've sponsored this video. All they asked for was for me to try out the machine and share my thoughts about it, so that's what this video is going to be. Alright, so let's go over the motion system. So it's got some stepper motors that allows them to move this bed backwards and forwards, and then it's got some motors in the left and right side that allows it to move the bed up and down. It's also got onboard lights and cameras, so you can see it's lighting this thing up really nicely. That allows it to get a really nice picture. So when you're looking at the app on your phone or your computer, you can see exactly what you're printing on, and you can line up your images onto your objects that you want to be printing on. I've printed on things ranging from ceramic to plastic to metal, and you can even print on glass. So it's really flexible with the type of products you can make, and you're not limited to making 3D printed little trinkets like this anymore. Now you can produce professional looking printed objects with really rich colors. And the reason why I'm calling this a 2.5D printer or a 3D printer is because it can actually deposit a third dimension of material. So it just piles up resin layer on top of layer, and you can build a 3D relief. So I've got a couple examples of that. On this one, this is the most basic example. This is basically just my NBR logo, but I embossed it so it's a millimeter thick. And you can touch it and feel it, and it looks really cool. But you also have more advanced applications of this 2.5D printing, where basically you feed it to their AI algorithm, and they're able to produce a three-dimensional relief. So on this print, you can see it's got some dimensionality to it. If you look at the reflections, you can see the subject of the picture, in this case it's Napoleon on his horse. It's raised up off the surface of this part. So it gives a little bit of 3D pop, and I really like this picture. This is a picture I took at a steakhouse, and you can see the glistening red meat, just delicious food. When I printed this out, it really struck me how much of a special product this is. This is crazy. It looks like meat. Because you're able to reproduce images from your phone in 3 dimensions, or at least some semblance of 3 dimensions, and it really brings you back into the moment in which you took that picture or you made that observation. You could apply this to any type of memorable experience, whether that's a sporting or family event, or in this case, just a really nice restaurant that I went to. I just remember looking at the delicious cuts of meat, looking at all the marbling and the texture of it and the deep red colors. And it's just really amazing that it can reproduce that. You know, it kind of touched my heart a little bit. So I have a bit of a soft spot for this 3D printer already. Originally, I had some complaints about this machine in my first couple of days of using it. One was that there's a bit of a resin smell that was coming off of the printer, but then I realized that I didn't install the included activated carbon filter. Once you get that installed, the resin smell is a lot more manageable. You can still smell it a little bit, but it's nowhere near as bad as my other resin-based 3D printers in the past. But for safe measure, I would still recommend setting this up in a well-ventilated area. The other cool thing that you can do with this printer is you can print on cups and mugs. I've got my logo here, but this could be your Little League sports team or a golf championship, or maybe you're hosting some kind of corporate event or a wedding and you want to make custom merchandise that people can take home with them. This machine can handle that. You can print pictures of your pets on all sorts of things like refrigerator magnets or even like a little dog tag or something. Here's an example where I just printed this on an AirTag. AirTags are these little GPS tracking devices where you can basically locate your lost or stolen items. The only issue is that they all kind of look the same. So here you have a bunch of AirTags and they all look the same. And if you get these mixed up, you might forget which one is which. But with this one, I was able to print a little camera on here. So then I could label this AirTag as my camera AirTag. And if I ever get these jumbled up, and I needed to put one of these in a camera bag, I would know which one to use. So it's useful for marking things for practical reasons. It's useful for making memorabilia, just to remember special moments that you've had. And just the range of textures and the amount of detail that you get in the pictures is really impressive. Here's a picture that I took in Tokyo. I don't know if you can see all the detail on this print, but this is a lot more detail than I can get out of my regular paper printer. I mean, this is the cheapest EcoTank printer on the market. And I think there's a higher end one that can print pictures a little bit better. But it can't print on stuff like this, or stuff like this, or directly onto things like this. Like, the applications of this are pretty wild. And working with this thing was really fun because it allowed me to take all of these pictures that I've taken over the past years and actually print them out in a form that I can, start bringing them into my everyday life and remember those experiences that I've had. And it's just a lot more special than something that's 3D printed on a traditional 3D printer. With stuff like this, you've got layer lines, you can't do full color, but with this, since it's using inkjets and it can blend those inks, you can produce any color, and they're very vibrant and rich colors. And I'm just really impressed with this machine overall. But yeah, in terms of making custom merchandise and memorabilia, this has got to be one of the best machines on the market for that. I've just been showing you examples of smaller objects that I've been printing because that's all that would fit on this included smaller print bed. I'll just take it out of the printer real quick so you can see what kind of printing area we're working with. This one is 88 millimeters by 330 millimeters. I think it's 333 millimeters wide. And that's good enough for me. I didn't need to print large signs or anything like that. But you can do that by switching over to this module. So this one is a heck of a lot bigger. I think it's 400 by 300 millimeters. So it's a really big workspace. And with that, you can print stuff directly onto canvases like this. And their AI texturing algorithm can even reproduce brush strokes. So like oil paintings, they usually have some dimensionality to them from the thickness of the paint. You can reproduce that on this machine. However, I opted to not use this print bed while I've been using this machine. It would be really easy to install. You just fold the front and back panels down, and then this drops right in and it automatically makes all the electrical contacts. In terms of setup, it was really easy to get going with this machine. You just follow the prompts on the screen, and I was printing in about a half an hour. And when you want to print with something, let's say I wanted to mark on this AirPods case, I could just put that in here, and then I tell it to scan, and it moves up, takes some pictures, and then sets the proper Z height. So this whole platform moves up and down, and it'll use these lasers on the side to get everything to the proper height so that it can print onto it. Those inkjets have a relatively limited working range. They only inkjet properly in about a 1 centimeter range away from the nozzles, so it has to raise it up to the right level so that it can start printing on it. It's sometimes interesting to take a look at a failed print. So here is basically a job I set up with 3 different objects, and when it went to scan and set the height, it detected this object. So this one was at the correct level, and these ones were too far away. So it just kind of sprayed paint towards them, and it didn't really produce a nice image. Just ended up spraying a bunch of little dots there. And that's what happens when you're too far away from the inkjets. So in this case, it looks like there's about a 15 millimeter difference in height between this object and this object. So I guess the lesson here is if you're going to do batches of parts, just do batches that are all the same height. That would be fine. But when you start messing around and adding taller and shorter objects into the same print job, it's not going to print everything perfectly. So in this case, I probably should have just printed this on its own, and then taken this off, rescanned, and then printed these ones. That isn't much of an issue on a regular 2D printer because it's always printing the same thing, and the paper is always the right distance from the inkjets. But with this one, this platform has to move up and down a little bit. And what I like about this smaller platform is that it's completely self-contained when you're printing with it. You can fold up both of these sides, and then using this included activated carbon filter, it recirculates the air and it gets rid of a lot of the resin smell. I can still smell things a little bit, but it's very manageable. I'd still want to set it up in a well-ventilated area, especially if I were using this larger print surface. Because with this one, you have to fold both edges out, so this whole thing is open and you're not getting as much of the benefit from this activated carbon filter. So if you're using something like this, I would want to, have my whole workspace ventilated and preferably have some kind of vent that's pulling air directly out of the building so that you're not breathing the resin fumes. And that is one concern that I'd have with a machine like this is since you're ink jetting resin, some of that becomes aerosolized. So when it's all closed up like this, you've got that filter that's getting rid of those particles. But if everything's open, then when you're spraying that ink, it's kind of like spray painting. You don't want to be spray painting in an area where the air quality matters. So keep this kind of stuff in the garage or in a well-ventilated workshop and you'll be all right. But it's just something that you have to consider when working with this, especially with these doors open. In terms of ink costs, you've got 100 milliliter cartridges up here. So altogether, we've got 600 milliliters or a little over half a liter of ink loaded up. And that's enough to do quite a bit of printing. I think it's something like $30 or $40 a cartridge to get replacement ink for this machine. However, a lot of these prints were only using a couple milliliters of ink. I should be able to print hundreds of these refrigerator magnets without having to worry about changing the ink cartridges out. So it's not ridiculously expensive to run. However, if you're doing a lot of these 3D effect prints, I'll put these side by side so you can see how much thickness was built up on these prints. It's about 3 millimeters, I think, was the setting that I used for this one. And you can go up to 5 millimeters, I believe. And there might be ways to go even higher than that. But when you're printing like this, it's using significantly more resin because it's building up that three-dimensional shape before it sprays the colored layer on top. So for this, it's using white ink to build up a base layer and a three-dimensional shape, and then it sprays the colored ink on top of it. So if you're doing a lot of these 3D relief style prints, then you're probably going to want to buy a couple extra cartridges of that white ink. I did a pretty long print job where I printed all three of these at the same time. We've got 3 of these prints with the embossing effect, and it didn't end up using that much ink. I think it used something like 3.7 milliliters of ink, and this is a pretty aggressive amount of embossing material to be using. I don't think I'd be using this much in everyday use. But if you have a special project where you just need to use a lot of embossing ink to get some really cool effect, then you might need to invest in some extra ink. And that's just the cost of doing business. But anyways, something like this where I'm using a whole boatload of ink, this is probably about 2 milliliters of ink, which is about 2% of that white ink cartridge. So I think a cartridge is $40. Divide that by 50. We're looking at under $1 worth of ink to produce something like this. So I think that's pretty reasonable. And if you don't want to use as much ink, just stick to the regular 2-dimensional printing where you're just, printing full color images on whatever object that you want. And it's not going to use that much ink. So yeah, I think this is a very special product. I don't think there's anything on the market, at least in this price point, that does anything close to what this does. And I'm kind of curious what the development mindset was. We've seen printers from the likes of Mimaki, and I think FlashForge is working on full 3-dimensional versions of this technology where they use inkjets to build up a support layer that's dissolvable, and then they lay down the colored ink and then lay down more support material. And you end up with a lot of waste when you do that because all that support material has to be dissolved away. When you're doing stuff like this, where it's just 2.5 dimensions, there's no support material, so you don't have any post-processing. You basically just print your stuff out and you're left with final products. Also, there's a lot less waste because you're not having to deal with all of that support material that you're just pouring down the drain or disposing of responsibly. I'm not sure exactly what you're supposed to do with that stuff. So yeah, I'm really impressed with this machine. Also, it comes with this module that I was playing around with. That's how I was able to print on this mug. I got my little logo here. Basically, you load it up onto this wonderfully engineered machine. So basically, you just set this down like this and squeeze it. And then this little arm comes inside and holds this down. And then that allows this machine to rotate the cup. And you can print a full 360 degrees. You can print a design over the entire surface of this. And you just load this into the machine. Using this little latch, you just undo the latch, put this in, and then lock it in place. And then this whole thing actually tilts so that the conical surface of this mug is flat and level with the print head. It's a pretty ingenious solution. and it's cool to be able to print stuff like this at home. So this machine is very impressive technologically as well, and in terms of the software and user experience, that's also very well thought out. And the energy consumption is low enough that you'd be able to run it off of something like this. This is just a 12-volt adapter that you can plug into a car. A normal 3D printer draws hundreds of watts. This draws less than 100, so you'd be able to run it off of a regular cigarette outlet. So if you wanted to put one of these in the back of your truck or van and print things out at a local market or festival, you'd be able to do that. In terms of who this machine is for, really, I see this as a great machine if you're an existing print shop and you just want a smaller machine to run smaller jobs on. This would be great for that. Also, if you want to get into printing out these things with rotary printers, it's a great machine for that as well. I think the MSRP is around $2,000, but I think that's an incredibly good value for this machine. I've actually toured professional print shops and seen machines with similar capabilities to this that were selling for around $20,000. So to have this type of capability in a machine that's this inexpensive is just really cool, because that brings the price of entry into producing merchandise like this way down. And it's to the point where I might be able to start making custom Nathan Builds Robots merch. You know, that's a great application for this. If you run an office or a small business, whether you're a realtor or you need to print out some things to hand out at trade shows. I'm just barely scratching the surface of all the things that this machine can do. You can actually load up these sticker blanks onto the machine. You can print a colorful design onto the sticker blank and then laminate it, and then you have like your own custom stickers that you can put on your car. For me to actually cover everything this machine can do would probably take a month of filming and editing. So I'm just gonna leave it at what I've done here, which is basically just print out a bunch of cool stuff that I enjoy for my personal use. And maybe I can print out some merch later on. But for now, I've just been having fun with this machine, and it's been a blast to be able to take these pictures that I've taken and turn them into a real object that I can take around with me. So I don't know if you would want to buy some Nathan Builds Robots merch, but if I were to print some out, what kind of stuff would you be interested in? Would you want to see some Nathan Builds Robots as a definitive source of 3D printing news merch? I mean, that could be a hot drop that I put on my website. But yeah, the applications for this are endless. If you have your own products that you're selling, in this case, this is an Anchor product where they've already marked it. But if you were to, say, 3D print an object that you're selling and you want to put some more branding or logos on it, or a full color picture or some instructions with really fine text, you'd be able to just load it up into this machine and print directly on it. If you participate in any type of sporting events, whether you're running a little league team or some intramural baseball or something like that, you can print off all the pictures and merchandise for that. If you're a photographer, let's say you take pictures of weddings or birthday parties or corporate events for a living, having a machine like this would allow you to print off custom items for your customers and have them see the results and the products same day. Because if you have a printer like this, you can just whip out a prototype, just be like, hey, this is what the cup would look like. I might be able to send this out to a larger print shop and get a couple hundred of them made, but this is what you'd be dealing with. You know, it's just bringing that type of merchandise prototyping to a lower price point, and also allowing for greater customization and offering you a way to print out your cherished pictures and celebrate them in a way other than being on a phone screen or a TV screen when you're sharing it. So yeah, I really like this machine. There's so much you could do with it, but I will list a couple downsides. One is the use of resins that might not be good for the indoor air quality of the space that you're in. So you're going to want to use this in a well-ventilated area, especially if you're opening up the sides and printing on that larger platform. In terms of using this in an apartment, I really don't like using it that much. I have all the windows open and I've got fans blowing to make sure everything's well ventilated in here, because I'm a little paranoid like that. But when everything's closed up and the fan is working, you don't really smell anything. Like right now, I don't really smell it. It's just when I open the door, I can smell a little bit of that resin fumes. The other thing that might be considered a downside is a lot of the functionality and use of this machine is handled over the cloud. So you have to upload your pictures to their servers and then have them do the AI processing to be able to produce these type of 3D reliefs. There's a bunch of other AI generated features where you can like take a picture of yourself and put it on a dog or something and do all sorts of weird stuff like that, but I'm not really into that. I've got enough pictures that I want to print and share in my photography portfolio, so I'm not really worried about needing to use AI to generate pictures for me. I like to call it AI slop, But there are some genuinely useful cases of the AI functionality that they have built in, like being able to add a third dimension to a 2D image that you upload. But yeah, if you're working on stuff that is highly proprietary, or you don't want to share on a cloud service, then this might not be the machine for you. But for just sharing everyday pictures and printing out some stuff, I think it's pretty cool. Coming from the 3D printing community, I know we value privacy a little bit more than most people. But if you figure that in order to get this stuff printed before, you would have had to have sent it out to a print shop. That involves uploading it and sharing it with a third party anyways. It's really not much different for this machine. So yeah, those are the only two real downsides. The big upside is that you can print out all sorts of cherished memorabilia and custom little products and projects. I just think it's a really cool machine, and I'm going to have a lot of uses for this around my office. So again, I'd like to thank Anker for sending this product over to me for review. A lot of the products that I get in, I just absolutely hate, and I just end up not making a video about it. This one, they sponsored the video, which is very generous of them, and they gave me this machine, which is a really impressive machine. And I'm pretty impressed with the performance and the ease of use and all the things that this machine has to offer, especially at the low price point that it's coming in at. Now, they're actually doing a Kickstarter for this machine. A lot of people don't like Kickstarters, but when it's coming from an established company like Anker, you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to come out all right. Worst case, they end up having to cancel the project and they'll give you your money back. This product is so far along and so well developed, and they've done enough testing on it, and they've sent out enough units to reviewers that I'm pretty sure this machine has already made it to the mass production step, and they're able to sell this at the price that they're advertising. So check it out. I'll leave links in the description to where you can pick one of these up. I think the early bird special is around $1,600, and the full MSRP is going to be around $2,000, which I think is quite reasonable for this machine, given that the next best competitor for this is $10,000 or $20,000. So great value, lets you do all sorts of interesting stuff. It's been a real exercise in creativity coming up with print jobs for this thing, and I'm going to be printing out a lot more pictures in the years to come on this machine. I would do a little bit more of a technical deep dive on this machine. I was taking the panels off the sides and looking at all the components. You've got stepper motors and little pumps inside that are making the resin flow around, and you've got little cleaning nozzles and stuff. There's a lot of cool things going on this machine, but it's kind of outside the scope of this channel because I'm not planning on modifying this printer. Normally I like to take 3D printers apart and inspect them because I want to see where I can modify or improve it, or see where there might be some issues. But this being an inkjet machine, it's a little out of my area of expertise, and it seems to be working just fine. So we'll just leave well enough alone. In terms of construction, this thing's extremely well built. It's got a die-cast aluminum frame, and all the components are really tightly integrated in this package. It's actually quite impressive that they were able to get this to fit in such a small footprint. You can see it's just, the width of this thing, it's only about 10 inches wide. It's less than a foot. For those of you who speak metric, that's between like 20 and 30 centimeters. Really compact unit, a lot of cool capabilities. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I can't wait to get it set up in a better ventilated area so I can start printing things out on that larger workspace. Let me know if there's anything else you want to know about this machine, or if there's any interesting applications in 3D printing that you could think of for this. One thing that I've thought of is that you could 3D print a custom little holder up on the top here that clips on, and let's say you were just doing batches of hundreds of these AirPods. Well, you could have little slots for each AirPod that holds it in the correct position, so you could just fire up print jobs one after another. I think eventually they're going to have some kind of feature. This might be something that I just haven't discovered yet that's already in the software, but they might have some kind of feature where you can just throw your objects on the tray, and that camera is going to take a picture of it, automatically recognize where it needs to print to be able to produce the item that you're wanting to produce. So let's say this thing's off by 45 degrees. It'll automatically reorient the print job to fit on there. That's a capability that I've seen on some other machines, and this might have it. If it doesn't have it now, then they might add it in a future firmware update. But yeah, just a really cool machine. I've been kind of getting burnt out with all the 3D printer releases where it's all not really doing anything that's that much different. This machine is definitely doing something different. Another thing I was thinking is if you had some 3D printed objects, you might be able to throw them in here and spray like a really nice coating on it. And again, I'm just scratching the surface of all the things that this machine can do. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.